If you're looking for Borderlands 3 services, items, or anything like that, fast and safe, make sure to check out Easy NPC and use my coupon code NICK for 5% off your purchase, link in the description. Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2. Today I'm going to be showing you guys an absolutely insane Moze build. As you can see by the gameplay, this build is pretty much invincible and does a ridiculous amount of damage. All the gameplay here is on Mayhem 4, and as you can see, I can literally just stand here and get murdered by these guys in the slaughter shaft, which do a ridiculous amount of damage and have a lot of health as well. And I can also just beam them and they die really quickly. Definitely the highest damaging build that I've seen, and not only that, it's pretty much impossible to kill. Of course, this is going to be amazing for anything you're doing on Mayhem 4, whether it be the raid, farming stuff, whatever. This build is insanely good for that. Unfortunately, it is a little bit gear reliant and there are a lot of moving pieces, so I'd recommend staying until the end of the video when I go over all of the gear, the anointed effects that you want, the shields, etc. And there's also two different ways to set up the build that I think is important to know about. So yeah, let's get right into it. Alright, so like always, we're just going to start with a completely empty tree and then just go down in the order that you would want to spec it. So first off, we're going to start with a few points into Cloud of Lead. This just pretty much makes it to where every fourth shot rather, doesn't consume ammo. Overall, what you want to do with this build is pretty much stack a lot of magazine size as well as get some ammo redistribution so that you pretty much never have to reload and you're just constantly spraying with a Lyuda, which is probably the highest damaging gun in the game. This is really good because it'll pretty much just make it to where less of your shots are going to consume ammo, and it increases your overall damage by giving you extra incendiary damage. Then we're going to put 1 point into redistribution. This pretty much makes it to where every time we score a crit, we gain increased ammo regeneration. If you play with the Lyuda perfectly and you're pretty much just ADSing and you're beaming them in the head, you get all of your ammo back insanely fast with this because you're just spamming crits over and over again, especially with the added effect that Lyuda shoots multiple projectiles. This is pretty much what makes the build work, as well as getting some other anointed effects to give you ammo regeneration. That's also very strong. But yeah, getting a pretty big magazine is also going to be very impactful with this because you have additional ammo regeneration based on how big your magazine is. So as long as you're making sure to land those crits and you have a big magazine, this is insanely strong. The rest of our points we're going to put into match set. You can put 4 points here. This is going to increase our magazine size, and since we're going to be using 3 Lyudas simultaneously, you're only going to be like using one of them, but you want to have 3 of them equipped because they're all going to be the same manufacturer. You could use other Vlad guns if you wanted to, but this is going to make it to where the magazine size bonus that you're getting is more substantial than it already was. So overall, that's pretty helpful. And then the rest of the points we're going to put into Scorching RPMs. This is going to increase our fire rate and our crit damage. Overall, this pretty much just results in free damage, especially because we're spamming crits. There is a case to be made for Stoke the Embers if you're using an incendiary gun. Kind of depends on the content that you're doing. You could decide to put 3 points into this and then just a couple points into Scorching RPMs. It really just depends on what you're doing. Honestly, though, for a more well-rounded build, I'd rather just go into Scorching RPMs and kind of avoid that. Some people like to use Scrappy for the extra handling, although I don't think it's worth it because you're only going to be wanting to use a Lyuda when you're ADS'd, although it is a little clunky to play with, constantly aiming in. That's going to make it to where your bullet spread isn't large, and then you're hitting more of your bullets, and ultimately hitting more bullets equals more damage. So getting the handling there isn't going to affect how your gun fires while ADS'd, so we're pretty much just going to be ignoring that. And Daka Bear is useless. You could go for Russian Offensive if you like to sprint and shoot, but of course you can't sprint while ADSing, and that's what you want to be doing. Then we're going to put 5 points into the Iron Bank. Of course, we want this to increase our magazine size, and that's pretty much what the build is entirely based around. Now, one version of the setup is to go for 3 points into Click Click, and then go for Forge, and then you could put 1 more point into Some for the Road, or maybe a point into Stoke the Embers, or maybe just finish off match set. Kind of up to you there. The reason that I'm not going to be doing this is because I'm going to vouch for more damage on the orange tree by speccing into some other things. Overall, though, if you're worried about ammo regeneration and you don't have the anointed gear, that makes this build incredibly strong. You could easily go for Forge if you're having ammo issues, just to give you some of that ammo regeneration constantly every second. Personally, though, I don't really see it as necessary, and I'd rather get additional damage elsewhere. But Click Click is insanely good because you can get upwards of 36% damage, and since you're constantly shooting and you're sitting around that lower point of your magazine, around like 10 to 20 bullets with your Lyuda because you're waiting for bullets to regen, you're getting a lot of that additional damage pretty frequently. But for me, I'm going to go 5 points into Armored Infantry on this tree, and we're just going to book it all the way down this tree. This isn't going to be too helpful because our shields aren't constantly active, and it isn't a ton of extra damage and ton of extra gun damage or damage reduction, but it is extra, so might as well go for it, and we need to get further down into the tree. Then we're going to put 5 points into Drowning in Brass. This is a kill skill that is going to increase our gun damage and reduce our fire rate, but it reduces our fire rate by a very minimal amount, and it's definitely worth it to go for the gun damage there. We don't really want to go for Selfless Vengeance because if we accidentally reload during the wrong time, we could eventually kill ourselves, and we don't really want to do that. It doesn't remove that much of your health though, so you could go for it. But honestly, you don't really see yourself reloading with this build, and the extra damage is only incendiary, so it's only helpful really if you're using incendiary damage, or an incendiary gun rather. Or no, actually, I read that wrong. It does bonus incendiary damage regardless, so it would be fine, but the problem with it, again, is that you aren't really reloading with your Lyuda, so I wouldn't really go for it. And Thin Red Line is actually going to make it to where you will just die with the build, so you don't want to go for that. You would rather go for a couple points into Flat Off Ingenuity. But before we do that, we're going to go into Experimental Munitions. This just makes it to where we do extra incendiary damage whenever we score a crit, which pretty much just results in free damage. And then, of course, we can just put some points into Flat Off Ingenuity. Getting an extra shield isn't really going to help us with the way that Stopgap works because the capacity on it is so low anyways. But we don't really have anything else to put it into. If you want extra damage, just for the sake of having extra damage, you can go into Selfless Vengeance. Honestly, though, you really are never reloading with this build just because of the way that the Lyuda works and the ammo regen works. But yeah. Then we're going to put 3 points into Desperate Measures here. This is just going to give us extra damage when our health is low. Our health isn't going to be that low too frequently, but overall just results in extra damage, and hey, who doesn't want extra damage? And then you can put the rest of the points into Selfless Vengeance, or you can put it into Behind the Iron Curtain. And then we're going to put 5 points into Phalanx Doctrine. This just gives us extra gun damage, which of course is really good. It's pretty much insane. I mean, even if you're speccing into the build the other way, you want to have a class mod that is going to give you some points into this, because you can quite frequently, depending upon the content that you're doing, even in Slaughter Shaft, I constantly have at least 3 to 5 stacks of this, which is a ton of extra gun damage. And if you're doing any content with enemies that are a lot squishier or die a lot quicker than the enemies in Slaughter Shaft, you're gaining even more out of this. So you definitely want to make sure to have a class mod that has some points into this. And even if you do, it's still worth speccing into. And then we're going to put 1 point into Force Feedback, which is really good. Whenever you score a crit, it's going to immediately begin recharging your shield, which pairs very nicely with Stopgap and pairs pretty nicely with Armored Infantry as well, since you're constantly going to have your shield active. And then we're also going to put a point into Tenacious Defense. Whenever your shield is fully depleted, you instantly restore a portion of the shield. We don't really care about that much, but we care about the extra gun damage that we get whenever our shield gets depleted. Overall, though, the most important thing here is Phalanx Doctrine, and that's why I go over here rather than going into Click Click. And funnily enough, we're going to have 1 point left over, so we can put that into Click Click if we want. You could go for some for the road and just make it to where you have infinite ammo for a short period of time so that you can take advantage of redistribution for that 1 second. So let's say that I were to completely run out of ammo for whatever reason, and I just don't want to wait for Forge to regen my ammo, or maybe I don't have Forge and I don't have a tear weapon, so the only way for me to regen ammo is via redistribution, but I don't have any ammo. You could just hop into Iron Bear, hop out, and then spray your gun with infinite ammo, and then because you have infinite ammo, take advantage of redistribution and get all that ammo back that you missed. I don't really like having to hop into Iron Bear, and since I have terror weapons that pretty much will just regen my ammo passively anyways, I'm just going to put the point into Click Click just because I like that damage. So yeah, that's pretty much how you want it. And then in terms of your gear, this is pretty important. You want to have a lot of anointed effects. Of course, the most important thing is getting a level 1 stopgap. This pretty much makes it to where the recharge delay and the recharge rate is super fast, and the capacity is very low to where it pretty much breaks instantly. And then on shield break, you become immune for 5 seconds. And then you also are going to be regenerating your health while you're immune, pretty much making it to where you never die. In order to get a level 1 stopgap, all you have to do is just have a level 1 character, go farm whatever drops the stopgap on that character, and if you don't get it the first time, just recreate the character and just do that over and over again. All this gear is legitimately obtainable, by the way. I just happen to have god rolls of it because I've had some friends help me, give me some pieces of gear and whatnot. It is, of course, incredibly difficult to get gear this well rolled, but none of it is modded or anything like that, so don't worry about that. So yeah, main thing, getting the stopgap, And then you want to have it to where, while terrified, you gain ammo regeneration. You can either get that on the shield or you can get that on the grenade. This pretty much just makes it to where you purposely get yourself terrified by using a face puncher, which has the anointed effect. Melee attacks have a 25% chance to apply terror to yourself. So you just swap to this every once in a while, shoot an enemy, and because this counts as a melee attack, you pretty much apply terror to yourself instantly. And then once you have terror, you gain increased ammo regeneration, and then you can just get this stacked up really high by shooting more. And then you pretty much just have infinite ammo regen, and then you also, while having the anointed effect, while terrified, gain increased damage and fire rate. That, of course, just increases your damage and your fire rate, which is really strong. And then we also have the terrified effect, or anointed effect. You have an extra chance to fire an extra projectile per shot, which is also going to pair very nicely with redistribution, because we're going to be hitting more shots, giving us more crits, giving us more ammo back. Overall, all of it pairs very nicely with each other. But you also want to definitely make sure that you have a bloodletter. This makes it to where with the bloodletter and the stopgap, this is what makes it invincible. I'm sorry that I forgot to mention this. I kind of just completely slipped my mind. But this gives you 150% shield delay and minus 50% shield recharge rate. And this makes it to where if Moze would be healed, you gain shield instead. And if she would regenerate health, she also gains shield regeneration. So the additional health regeneration that you're getting from stopgap, as well as with this class mod, this pretty much just makes it to where we get shield regeneration instantly, but we don't really need that because we're speccing into that anyways. But if you're not speccing into, what's it called? If you're not speccing into force feedback, you could just, you'd be speccing into forge and then you'd want that anyway. It doesn't really make that big of a difference. You just want to make sure that you have bloodletter mixed with a stopgap being at level 1, and you pretty much just become invincible. The artifact that I have, getting the minus max health is nice, and then you also want the extra fire rate or from enrage, but of course this has extra sniper damage and extra mag size, which is insanely good with this build. But increasing your fire rate is really good whenever you melee an enemy, and you're of course getting that enrage because you're using face puncher, which is going to count as a melee. And then of course we have 3 Lyudas here, different elements. You pretty much just want 3 just for Vladov weapons, but if you want to use another Vladov weapon like this or something like that, and you want different types of anointed effects, you can definitely go for that. But of course Lyuda, the damage that you're getting out of that is absolutely insane. But yeah, as long as you're getting these terrified effects, you're pretty solid. If you don't have these terrified effects that give you ammo regen, and you don't want to use, or you don't have a face puncher that gives you this, where you can apply terror to yourself pretty instantly, you can just use other anointed effects where on action skill end you gain extra damage, and then you can pair that with hopping into your Iron Bear over and over again, gaining the full, or gaining infinite ammo pretty much. And then you could decide to spec some points into reducing the cooldown of your Iron Bear, so that you could just hop in and out pretty much over and over again to gain the benefit from having those anointed effects. But yeah, since I'm not using an action skill, that's not really going to help. And then there's also stuff like this where killing an enemy grants weapon damage and reload speed. That's pretty nice. There's a ton of extra anointed effects that you could go for if you don't have the right terror setup. But ultimately, this is definitely what you want to go for. But the build will do a ton of damage regardless. If you don't have it, this pretty much just makes it to where you gain infinite ammo regen, and you don't really have to worry about that. And of course, the extra fire rate and extra damage there is pretty nice. So yeah, I'm just going to leave some gameplay. I hope that this helped. Of course, you want to make sure that you try to get some extra sniper rifle damage and magazine size with this. Of course, my gear is pretty much perfectly rolled, so yeah, it's going to be difficult for you to get it set up this well. But once you do, it's definitely probably the best build in the game. So yeah, if you guys have any recommendations or anything like that, please feel free to let me know in the comments below. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Peace.